Gewaltig. Okay, we are on the bottom of Tzadik Zayin Aleph, and yesterday we were discussing the concentration of wine and when wine is on its way going bad. We ended up having a halacha that when you have wine that tastes like wine but smells like vinegar, so it's starting to go bad, that there's a machlokes of the bracha Shehakol or Hagafen, and we passed on like Rabbi Yochanan with the bracha Hagafen. We also had a discussion as to how long it takes for wine to go completely bad. It takes 3 days, and after it's completely vinegar, then it takes another 3 days till it becomes a very strong type of vinegar. Okay, gewaltig. I just wanted to share a beautiful story. We said last night in Slichas, Hinei no el ha tlois ve'al lechatois. Don't look at our Averis, Hashem. Look at the struggles and the nisyonis, the difficulties that we have. So there's a famous story. The Perushim in Yerushalayim, they are descendants of the Talmidei Hagra that made Aliyah. And the Talmidei Hagra that made Aliyah were led by a Yid by the name of Yisrael Shklov. He was like the leader of the Talmidei Hagra. And he took a group of people to Yisrael that planted that community, and they traveled by boat. So they were on the Mediterranean in a boat, and the boat was in a terrible storm, and it was being battered, and it wasn't going to make it. It was going to capsize. And so the captain of the ship told all of his passengers, you have to prepare for death. Whatever your religious rites are, do them, because we're not surviving. This boat is going down. So Rabbi Yisrael Shklov got his crowd together, and he said, since we're about to die, Al Kiddush Hashem, let's make sure that we can purify our neshamas to the highest purity, so that we'll go straight to Gan Eden, to the highest levels of Gan Eden. So let's do tshuva and let's be mizvada. Normally, you're not supposed to be mizvada barabim, because when one is mizvada barabim, it's a cheshikol chel Hashem. It's showing people averis, and maybe it's even planting ideas into their heads. But now that we're all about to die, let's take advantage of the extra humiliation that we'll have when we're mizvada our averis barabim, and that'll add an extra level of purity. And that's what they did. So they decided they're going to go from youngest to oldest. So the youngest child there was 11 years old, and they asked him to get up and be mizvada his averis. When he got up, he was heaving and crying. He couldn't get words out until he finally says, I lied to my mother. So they asked him, okay, tell us the circumstances. How did you lie to your mother? So he says, we had so little food that there wasn't enough food for my mother to feed all of us, all of our siblings. So what she would do is, the youngest child who didn't go to cheder yet, she wouldn't give him food. She would give me that food because I was going to cheder, and she felt that I needed the extra energy. And you know what I did? I lied to my mother, and I told her that they feed us in school, so she should give it to my younger brother. And he was crying and crying and crying. So Yisrael Shlomo got up on the ship and he said, Rebbeinu Shloim, in Slichus on the first night, we say, Pnei no elatlois al chatois. Look at our struggles, look at our difficulties, but don't look at our averis. Hashem, I'm telling you the opposite today. Pnei lachatois v'lo latlois. Look at the averis of your nation. This is the aver of your nation. A child lied so that his mother will give his brother food. And look how ois men she is. Look at the averis. From the averis, I want you to bring them a Yeshua. And history has proven that it worked, because they're there. He's the one who established a community of the Perushim in Yerushalayim. And that's the story. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvarim. Zok the Heilige Gemara.
What daf we on?
We're on today's daf is Tzadik Zayin, but yesterday we got pretty far. We got to the bottom of Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph. So that's why we decided to start a little later today, because everybody can use the extra 15 minutes of sleep. So we're at the bottom of Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph. Amarav Zutra Bar Tovia Amarav. Ein oimim kiddush hayoim. You're not allowed in the kiddush. Ella alayayin. We're going to be making a lot of kiddushes over the next couple of weeks, as Rabbi Bornstein spoke out. So it makes sense that we're learning this Gemara. We could say that this is davar b'itay matoiv. So ein oimim kiddush hayoim ella alayayin. What type of yayin? Haroyu linosech al gabe mizbech. Wine that you could. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm totally off. No wonder you were questioning me. We're up to Tzadik Bava with Aleph. I got too ahead of myself, and I haven't had so much sleep, so I got mixed up where we're holding. I'm sorry.
I thought I missed the day somewhere.
No, I also had such good Torah on Tzadik Zion, so I was excited about it. Itmar. Listen, I have found I regularly skip a couple of lines here and there, and nobody tells me about it. I don't know if people are embarrassed to tell me. And then when I say sure at 9, I said, hey, I didn't even learn this morning.
It's because I thought I fell asleep.
Okay. Itmar. Hamoicher chavis yayin lechaveri. Someone who sells a barrel of wine to his friend. Chavis isn't really a barrel, it's more like a jug. V'hechmitza. And it went bad. And the Rashbam tells us that it became bad in the kelim of the moicher. In other words, the wine was never transferred out of the jug that it was delivered to the lokeach by the moicher. So let's have a look. So the wine was delivered in the barrel of the moicher, but it remained in the rishus of the lokeach. The hechmitza, and it went bad. So Amarav, Kol Gimel Yomim Harishonim B'Rishus Moicher. The first 3 days we say it's B'Rishus Moicher, it's the Moicher's fault, and the Moicher has to refund the money or give him good wine. Mikan ve'elech, but after 3 days, B'Rishus Lakech. And there's a nice Rashbam on this to explain. Amarav Kol Gimel Yomim Harishonim B'Rishus Moicher. You know why? Shedavar Yedua She'ina Yain Machmitz B'Pachas Migimel Yom. As we just learned yesterday, it's a 3-day process for the wine to go bad. To start to have a little bit of a smell of vinegar. Even though technically it's still considered wine, as we learned yesterday, nevertheless, we say that since the process started in the Rishus and the Moicher, even though technically when he delivered it, it still had a legal status of wine, but Lamaisa, it was already going bad. We look at it from a sales perspective as if he sold chometz, and therefore it would not be a mechira. Surely, the moment there's a whiff of chometz in there, surely it's eventually going to turn completely. And it's similar to someone who sold wine and it turned out it was all vinegar. Did the Lekech not check it before he bought it at the beginning of the 3 days? And if he would have sniffed a little bit of chometz when they opened it up to taste it, Lekech wouldn't have taken it. So it must be that at the time they tasted it before the mechira, it was actually perfect. Zok Rashbam, not so. It must be the b'shas mechira haver echayachala. And I guess the lekech just didn't notice it. But if it went bad within 3 days, it's impossible that it was perfect at the time of the sale. By the time the Kabbalah Pirkei the Moichayayin the Chaver v'Hichmitz Einoi Chayav Achar Yosy. We learned that if I sell you something and it goes bad by you, how could I be responsible for it? Zok Rav Mukil Alach Gimel. Rav will have to say that's more than 3 days later. Aval Toich Gimel Loi Karina Na Moicher Yayin LeChaveroi v'Hichmitz Ela HaMoicher Yayin LeChaveroi v'Nimtza Chometz. If it happens after 3 days, then you could say I bought wine and it became chometz. But if it was chometz within 3 days, I bought chometz. I already bought wine that was starting to turn. Inami, or you could say that where it says that it's a good mechira, inami mukamel bekankanim delakeach Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina. Maybe even within 3 days, if you already transfer the wine from the kelim of the moicher into the kelim of the lakeach, now the moicher could say, I sold you good wine, and even though it went bad within 3 days, because your kankanim had contamination in them, and therefore I'm not responsible. The kankan garam lahachmitz meira. Your barrel that you transferred the wine that I sold you into, that was the cause of it going bad. Why did they talk about a chavis and not a martev? Because a chavis is a chiddush. Why? You might thought if I'm buying a chavis, it means I'm ready to use, and therefore within a day it'll all be gone. So it doesn't matter if in 3 days it's going to turn bad. And the buyer shouldn't have been waiting with it. The lifter moicher kamash malon. No, even when you buy something in a jug, you're not necessarily buying it for immediate use. You might be buying it to use in the future. So that is a sheet of Rav that for 3 days the lakach is protected. Shmuel says, turning on Talmud Beis, Chamra Akasva the More Shav. The Rashbam learns, Eine Chai V'Chayusa. The Moicher is not Chai. Afal Pi Shehechmitz B'Toich Chavish Shal Moicher. Even if it became vinegar in the Chavish of the Moicher, within 3 days, it's still not the Moicher's problem. Mishum the Chamra Agvo the Gaver Shav. Or the Chamra Agabo the Gaver Shavar. The wine gets ruined on the shoulder of the man. Al Kotef Ha'odam Medali. It jumps based on who owns it. Kalemer Masli Goyim. It's a fancy way of saying the Mazal of Lekech messed it up. It was perfectly good wine, but Lekech had a virus, and that causes wine to go bad. Chet Shal Bal Hayayin Kidinav Kadon Lekabon Midechsiv Af Ki Hayayin Boiged. The Gemara brings a pasuk and tomorrow's daf that says that the yayin boiged, the yayin will be boiged against the owner if the owner is boiged against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, the moicher can't have any liability. It's warranted against factory defects. It's not warranted against misuse by the owner. This is how Rashbam learns. Okay, Rabbi Yosef Uvda Kavaseda Rav. Rabbi Yosef Paskin in a situation like Rav B'Shichra by beer, not by wine, and the Rishonim speak out. The Rishonim speak out. Who said Shmuel ever argued by Shichra? Shmuel only argues by wine, so it could be it's not only Rav, it's like everybody. The Chavos of the Shmuel V'Chamer, we pass like Shmuel by wine that the Lekeach is responsible, and even though the wine went bad within 3 days, if they tasted it before and it was fine, the moicher is liable. The moicher is not liable. I'm sorry. The moicher is not liable. We blame it on the lekech. The hilchos of Kavasi the Shmuel, and we pass in like Shmuel. Tosfos does not like the way Rashi explained Chamer Akatva the Marei Shavar, that it means Masle Gorim. Because if it meant Masle Gorim, you know what Shmuel should have said? Masle Gorim. Why use this elaborate term that wine depends on the shoulder of the person who owns it? So Tosfos doesn't like it, and therefore Tosfos learns differently. Let's have a peek in Tosfos. Shmuel Omer Chamer Akatvi the Gaver Shavar Pirish the Chamer Masle the Gaver Gorim the Sphere like Reb Bar Yosef Lakamon, who said that Yain Boigid right to Lakach Ein B'Shus Moicher. Therefore, it's not the Moicher's problem. Zok Tosfos, I don't like this pshat. Veinira Chada number one. The Havel element could highlish the Lakamon the Chamer Masle the Gaver Gorim. That would have made so much more sense. Say what you mean what you say. But when it said later on that someone's arguing with Reb Bar Yosef, when the Gemara said on the tzad that you don't say Masle Gorim, the Gemara said that argues with Reb Bar Yosef who says Masle Gorim. The Gemara should have said it's arguing on Shmuel. But the ain't svara she yigrim Masle the Gavra she yemar lahachmitz toich gimel. We know it takes 3 days for wine to go bad. So even though it's your virus that's causing it to go bad, it's not going to go bad in an unnatural way. It's going to go bad in a natural way. It'll go bad in 3 days. And this happened within 3 days. So therefore, I don't agree with Rashi's or the Rashbam's pshat. How could you say Vadeyayin Legabe Truma V'dimel Masla the Gavagorim Bech Mitzviyah? How could you be so sure that it was good the first 3 days because it takes 3 days to turn? It must be that even if he's a Alaveira and it happened because of him, it still would have taken at least 3 days. V'nir lefarsh Rabbeinu Tam Chavra Akatvi the Gaver Shavar Kloimer Hayayin Kivin Shenosoi B'Ksofim Niskalko Ayidei Shenena Umir Lahachmit. It's handling on the shoulder of the gaver, meaning as you move it around, it's shaking around in the flask, it's shaking around in the barrel. That movement, that causes it to go bad. So therefore, The reason why the moicha is not responsible is because maybe the lekayach wasn't moving it around too much, and that caused it to go bad even within the 3 days. So that's Tosfos shot. 3 days, but if you're shaking it around, it could happen more. It could happen sooner, more quickly. Okay, so to more about there. Tanur echad sheikhar tomorrow. Sai if it's beer of dates. The echad sheikhar sayer. Sai if it's beer of barley. The echad shmora yayin, or if it's shmora yayin, which means you poured water onto it and you squeezed it out, so you have now liquid. Mevarchen aleyan shehakol niyabidva. The bracha on all these 3 items are shehakol, and the chayim oimrim shmorim sheyesh behem tam yayin. If you have shmorim that has a taste of wine, they're mevarch aleyan boyrei priyagav. Rabba Rabbi Yosef Dami Tervayu ein halacha kachayim, and shmorim you make a shehakol. So we're going to get into the details of that shortly, but there's a very important Tosfos about what bracha to make on juice that comes out of Paris. Let me see if I can find it over here. Echad sheikhar tamarim mevarach shehakol. So the very first wide line. Zokt Tosfos lav dafka sheikhar tamarim. It doesn't necessarily mean the sheikhar of tamarim. Now sheikhar tamarim is made by soaking the dates in water. So don't think it's only water that's not part of the tamarim. It merely absorbed taste from the tamarim, and that's why we make a shehakol. Rather, elafilu devash tamarim, even the actual juice that comes out of the dates, that also mavarch alav shehakol. My time, kedamar beketat mavarchin, omar mar baravashi, high dubshe the tamri, honey that comes from the date. That's literally the nectar that oozes out, sap that oozes out. Mavarch alav shehakol. You make shehakol. My timer zeya ba'almahu. We consider it like a sweat, but we don't consider it the essence of the peri, and therefore by yoytim in a peris kari zeya. Everything that comes out of peris is called zeya. That's why we make a shehakol and apple juice, not ha'etz. But like kamisha peris balachos kedolos. Zaktosis, I disagree with what it says in the lachos kedolos. That the only time the bracha gets degraded to a shehakol is the hanu dafka hosam the toru labamaya when they're soaked in water. Aval dive min tamri, but what flows directly out of the date, that honey mavarach alav boyer creates. So we have a machloikus, what bracha you make on the honey or the juice that comes out of pears. The Ka'amar Mar Baravashi, the Mar Baravashi said, the zeya ba'almahu, it's merely zeya. Va'yoytim min pears kari zeya. Va'afilu min hayoytim min hazeisim va'navim ha'zeya ba'alma. So that's why the Tosfos doesn't like the halachos gedolos. He has multiple rayos from different places. Eloi the mapik me arav aroitiv shesoifik es arboim al yoytzim. Now there was you have a ray also because a nazir gets malchus if he eats, if someone made a nether that he's not going to eat those things, he gets malchus for the juice that comes out of them. But there's a special pasuk. If it wasn't for that pasuk, we wouldn't even consider those the food. The truma, the kamar command kaitana, the tanya dvash tomorrow be'an tavuchen chayv kem v'chemish v'lazer v'shua poiter. But it's also only a chumrah of that of truma, but it has nothing to do with the fact that it's betzim peiros. The time of Yeshloimer, what's the reason? Why taka do we say that the zayah that comes out of a fruit? Why do we say that doesn't you don't make a bracha by parade on it? Because it doesn't become better. Wine, I guess, becomes better when it comes out of the grape, but the other juices don't become better. They don't get upgraded. I guess I'm not sure exactly why they don't become better, but they don't become better. Okay, again, doesn't become better. The isla iluya achrina v'pas. So here the Tosfos is adding, it doesn't become as good as it can be because the upgrade of any type of grain is really bread, not beer. How do you know in this juice, in this beer that you're drinking, how do you know that it's the main component is the barley? Maybe the main component is the water. Okay, gewaltig. So let's see the Gemara weiter. So the Gemara says, "Ein halacha k'acherim." We don't paskin like acherim, and therefore, even on shmorim, you will not make a bracha of bayre priyaga. So Zok Gemara, Omerov, the Chula Alma. Everybody agrees. If I took shmorim and I soaked them in 3 gallons of water, Rama Tlasa, the also Arba, and 4 gallons came out. So clearly 1 gallon is not from the water. There must be a gallon of wine, right? So you have a ratio here of 1 gallon of water to 4 gallons of wine. That is the perfect mix with which you normally dilute wine, 1 to 4. So Chamra, which for sure wine. Even the Rabbanon would agree with Acherim that it's wine. Rava l'tamei damarava, kol chamad leidari al chad klas maya, any wine that's not strong enough that you could dilute it 3 parts water to 1 part wine and it'll be good, lav chamrahu. But this clearly is wine because it's clearly 1 gallon came from the shmorim, 1 part out of 4 came from the shmorim, and the 3 parts water, so it's perfect. But I'll tell you where there's an issue. But also, so everybody agrees that it is wine if there's 1 part of whatever comes out of the shmorim to the 3 parts water. And everybody agrees, Rama Tulsa, but also Tulsa, everybody agrees that if you put in 3 gallons of water and you're only left with 3 gallons of water, there's no more liquid here after you strain out the shmorim. Clearly, there is no content of wine here because you have the same amount of water out as you had in. So, Kipli, where is there in fact a machlokes between Acherim and the Chachamim? Kipligi, the Rama Tulsa, you put in 3 gallons of water, or using gallons, it could be any shear. You put in 3 gallons of water into the shmorim, and when you strained it all out, also tilso palm. Now you have 3.5 gallons of water. So it's basically 1 part 1 to 6, right? Because 3.5 is 7/6. So you have 1 part wine to 6 parts water. The Rabbanan Sarvi, tilsa ayil, tilsa nothing. 3, you started off with 3 gallons of water, and those same 3 gallons of water are here as well. And all you have on top of that is the 1/2 gallon of wine. Pashle palga. Upalga, bishita palgi, 1 into 6, maya is water. I'm sorry, upalga, bishita palgi maya, v'loiklumu. It's bottle, right? It's too loose to concentrate. It's not concentrated enough. That's not wine. And that is why the Rabbanon hold that you make a shehakol. But Acherim Savri, when you put in 3 and 3.5 come out, you know what happens? Tolosa oil, treinu palganof. Some of the water that you put in will remain permanently in the shmorim. So if you put 3 in and 3.5 came out, only 2.5 of that was original water. The rest of it was juice that the shmorim are giving off and are not part of the original water. So therefore, they hold Tulsa ul treinu palganofik poshle kuza. You're left with 1 out of it's 1 to 1.5. Right now, I'm sorry. Now it's 1. Now it's 1 to 2.5. Right? It's 1 to 2.5. 1 to 2.5 is actually more than a third. Right? So novish poshle kuza, the kuza, the treyu palga, and we're calling the one a kuza. Kuza in 2.5. Kamram al Yehu. It would be good wine. Now the problem is, if I put in 3 and I got out 3, we said everyone's moidi that it's water. Why? According to Acherim, shouldn't you say that if you put in 3 and you got out 3, only 2 are the original water and 1 must be wine? That's what he says when you got 3.5, right? So let's see the Rishbam how he handles this problem. Acherim Sovri, Tulsa mayim oil. 3 gallons of water went in to the shmorim. Utreyu palga mayim nofik, and 2.5 came out. The ein derech lotzes kol nichnas. The norm is that not all the water that you put in that got absorbed by the shmorim will come out, and therefore element mayim nishru. there's a gallon of water that stayed absorbed in the shmarim, but the wine that was in the shmarim came out. The payer coffee mila'il, because the payer comes out first. So it's an interesting chemistry experiment. But I'll call upon them, what they're saying is this 3.5 that you have here, one of it is for sure wine that came out of the actual shmarim, and it's only 2.5 that is pure water. So Pashlu Chad Kois Sholem Shal Yayin Betray Bagal Shemaim. So the Rashbam is not working with gallons, the Rashbam is working with koises. So koises, akuz is a kois. So you have 1 to 2.5. V'chol shechein, surely the chamra ma'alya havi. This is for sure good wine. Midaleka alchat tosamaya. It's literally 1 to 2.5, not 1 to 3. So Frekter Rashbam. So if 3 went in, 3 went out, for sure it shouldn't be a problem. Avala'il durama tlasa, ba'avik tlasa. There ain't loymar shemina mayim nishru ba'yayin yota. Then you won't say that the water remained absorbed in the grapes, in the shmarim, and pure wine came out. You know why? The ain raglayim ledavar. There's no reason to assume such an unusual switch occurred. If the same amount of water went in and out, you don't start making cheshbonis what might have happened. You'll say it's the same water. But the problem is, if there's more moisture content, if there's more liquid content now than before, then we know for sure something came out of the grapes. Once we know for sure something came out of the grapes, we'll actually say that even more came out of the grapes than what meets the eye.
What happens if you put it in, right, water, and then something purple comes out? So then we know there was something in there. So the fact that it was the same amount that came out, I know there was something in there.
There has to be some grape in
There has to
it.
be some grape in there if it's sewage.
So, so you wonder why the Gemara doesn't discuss color, right? I mean, this works really good by white wine, but by red wine,
Taste,
I'm sorry.
taste, not color.
So I guess we don't look at it. I guess we don't give consideration to color. It's all totally in taste, I guess.
So you think that there's no red language of that anything came out, but maybe.
Or maybe that's just called Zeya Ba'alma. It's not called wine. Our question is very Pirgofen. So maybe even if it takes on the color, it doesn't have a halachic status of wine to make a bracha. Binami novik minayayin palgud novik. And even if something came out of the wine, we would also say that a half a kosh came out. The chat paga bechamisha pagi. So if there's 3 in and 3 out, and 2.5 of the 3 are water and half is wine, it's still outnumbered, still lav klumu, because it's 1 to 5. Okay, we'll stop here, and Be'ez Hashem. Let's try to get onto Amud Aleph. I have my joke. I have to get onto Amud Aleph.
Oh,
Okay. Are you telling me that there's an argument? So what is the Gemara saying now? The argument is between a cherem and the chachamim is if you put in 3 and you got 3.5. That's where the cherem say it's wine, and that's where the chachamim say it's water. Is that so? Is that so? Are you saying they're arguing when more wine comes out than the water that was put in? As the Rashbam says, the Gemara is not asking if you put in 3 and you got out 3. There's no kasha. Because the precious timer, like I already explained, then the Gabi Meiser Pligi. Oh, I missed out an important Rashbam earlier. The Rashbam asks, how could you say when 3 in or 3 out, everybody agrees it's water? We actually have exactly a case of 3 in 3 out, where there's a machlokes if that a din of Meiser. In other words, what if you had these shmorim and the shmorim belonged to Meiser Sheni, right? And you put in 3 water and you got out 3 water. There's a machlokes. There's a shita who holds that does have a din of Meiser Sheni. So if it's a din of Meiser Sheni, then it has a din of the grape. So by the same token, you should make a bar Pirgofen. So the Rashbam said, I already explained, in the Hida Gabi Meiser Pligi, that's only Mishum Chomer the Meiser. Really, Me'ikar Din, everybody would agree that this water doesn't have a Din Meiser. Also, Chomer of Meiser, there are those who are makmur to treat it like Meiser. But that wouldn't be a reason to make a bar Pirgofen. So maybe by Meiser there would be a Chomer, but definitely that doesn't really make it into wine. So but Tanan, we learned hamitamed v'noisen mayim b'mida. So mitamed means exactly that. You put water onto shmorim, and you put in water. Let's say you put in 2 gallons of water. Umotza kedei midasoi, and the amount of water that you found was exactly the same that you put in. Potter, that's not going to be mechuyev in meiser. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev, and Rabbi Yehuda is mechayev in meiser. Atkan loy pligi. There's no machlokes where there are banan potter you for meiser. Ella b'chtei midasoi. That's only if the same amount of water that you put into the shmorim is what you got out. So therefore, there's an argument that there's no meiser content here. If you put in 2 gallons of water and you got out 3, everybody agrees that there's a din of a chiyuv meiser. So if there's a din of a chiyuv meiser, when there's more water out than what you put in, so shouldn't that be a raya that everyone holds that this is wine? And therefore, how could an argument, the Rabbanan argue in a chayim and say you make a shehakol? Both the Tana Rabbi Yehuda and both the Chachamim in the Mishnah both hold that if there's more out and in, for sure there's a chiyuv meiser. If for sure there's a chiyuv meiser, it means for sure there's wine content. And if there's for sure wine content, you should make a boy or Hagafen. So that's not true. Yes, the example of the Mishnah where there's a machlokes is when it's kedei mudasa. But l'maisa, the Chachamim not only hold that it's considered water if you put 3 in, you got 3 out. Even if you put 3 in and got 3.5 out, the Chachamim also hold that it's water and you wouldn't have to bring meiser. So why didn't the Brisa quote the machlokes where there would be a bigger chiddush that even if more water came out, the Rabbanan still hold that it's only considered water? It wanted to show the koich hachomra of Rabbi Yehuda that even if the same amount of water that you put in came out, it's still considered wine. The problem is, don't we have a rule normally when the Brisa or the Mishnah wants to show a chiddush, it always shows the chiddush of the tarakula, not the tarachumra. So wouldn't it be better to show the tarachumim that even if there's no more water out and in, it's still not meiser? So Dr. Shpam for that, lo diacha koicha Rabbi Yehuda the mechayev, lo diacha koicha the Rabbanan lo yitzchach lemisni Yosy mitchem midasai. To show the power of the Rabbanan, it didn't need to show a case of Yosy mitchem midasai. You know why? The mills of the pshita of the potter. It's pashut that the Rabbanan would hold that even if more liquid came out than you put in, it wouldn't be meiser. It's all water. It's not considered wine. You know why? Because the porta chamra, the maya tuva bottle, just having a little bit of wine in a whole bunch of water would be bottle anyway. But leka chidush klal lashminan the pati Rabbanan b'yosher. It wouldn't be a chiddush to tell us that the Rabbanan hold there's no chiyuv meiser even if some juice came out. But Rabbi Yehuda's halacha is a huge chiddush l'chumra. Why? The avagav the leka tam yayin mechayiv. That even though you taste this juice, there's no taste of wine in it, you'll still be mechuyev to treat it like meiser. Okay, Gavaltik, let's stop here. The next couple of weeks, Kadosh Baruch Hu is pushing us to the max because